It's strange, the way a single moment can shatter an entire lifetime of certainty. I had always believed that betrayal came slowly, that it dripped in over time like a slow leak in the ceiling, giving you warning after warning before the flood. I thought I would sense it, smell it, feel it coming. But I was wrong. It hit me like a freight train, full force and without mercy, in front of 60 colleagues who had once admired me, respected me, perhaps even envied me. And it all started with a single accidental flick of a camera switch. The morning had begun as routinely as any other. A Monday in early fall, the skyline of New York glinting outside my window, coffee steaming next to my laptop. I adjusted my blazer, made sure my hair was neat, and logged into the monthly sales department meeting, a tedious but necessary ritual. We had an important project coming up, and attendance was mandatory. 60 faces appeared in their little squares on the screen, most muted, cameras turned on as per company policy. As director of sales, it was my duty to lead the team, to set an example. I smiled as I scanned the screen, mentally preparing my notes. That's when it happened. One of the new interns, Sophie Lane, a bright, ambitious young woman who had recently joined us from UCLA, accidentally turned on her camera. At first, it seemed harmless. A blurry background, a quick glimpse of a cluttered apartment. But then, he appeared. Daniel. My husband. He wasn't supposed to be here. Daniel was supposedly on a business trip in Chicago. Something about closing a deal that would take the entire week. I hadn't even expected to hear from him until Friday. But there he was, clear as day, walking behind Sophie in nothing but a crumpled t-shirt and boxers, his face pressed against her neck, kissing her like he owned her. For a split second, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a misunderstanding. But then Sophie laughed, that high, flirty giggle I had heard once or twice around the office, and turned her face towards him, their lips meeting in a kiss so intimate, so unapologetic. It sucked all the air out of my lungs. Around me the meeting froze. I could feel the collective shock radiating through the screen. Messages started flooding the private chat. Is that her husband? Holy shit, someone turn off the camera. Oh my God, poor Emma. I sat there, heart pounding so violently I thought it might break my ribs, but my hands remained steady. Years in corporate America had trained me well. Never let them see you bleed. Without a word, I reached for my mouse and hit record. Evidence. Always leave a trail. Daniel's voice echoed across the meeting, oblivious to the silent witnesses. Come on, baby, let's not worry about the meeting. Just 5 more minutes. Sophie giggled again, pushing him away playfully, saying something about how she still had to give her weekly report to Ms. Carter. Ms. Carter. Me. My name like a slap across the face. I glanced at the team. Some looked away, ashamed for me. Others stared, frozen, caught in the horror of the train wreck unfolding live before them. I wondered vaguely if anyone was recording besides me. No one said a word. No one dared. The damage was done. The illusion shattered. And there I sat. The woman who was supposed to have it all. The successful career. The handsome husband. The picture-perfect life. Exposed for a fool in front of her entire professional world. My mind raced. My throat burned with unshed tears. But I refused to give Daniel or anyone else the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Instead, I clicked my microphone on, my voice chillingly calm. Let's continue the meeting, I said. I apologize for the interruption. Please stay focused. We have a lot to cover. One by one, the team unmuted, hesitant, unsure, but they followed my lead. We discussed quarterly numbers, sales projections, client renewals, all while my marriage crumbled in the background. the betrayal rotting in my stomach like poison. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. When the meeting finally ended, I closed my laptop with deliberate care. I stared out at the skyline again, the same city I had conquered year after year, and for the first time, I didn't feel invincible. I felt something else entirely. Cold, sharp, focused. Daniel thought he had gotten away with it, that his little affair with a 23-year-old intern would remain his dirty little secret, while he smiled at me across candle-lit dinners and told me he loved me. He thought I would never know, never see the cracks forming beneath the surface of our perfect life. He thought wrong. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not confront him like a desperate, betrayed wife begging for explanations. No, I would burn everything he cared about to the ground, slowly, methodically, without ever breaking my smile. This wasn't heartbreak. This was war, and it had only just begun. If you're finding this story as shocking and compelling as I think you are, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Your support helps us create even more mind-blowing emotional stories just like this. Now, here's a quick question for you, just for fun. If you found out about your partner's betrayal during a public meeting, what would you do? A. Confront them immediately in front of everyone. B. Stay calm, collect evidence, and plan your revenge silently. Comment your answer below. A or B. I'm dying to see how many of you are thinkers like me, or firecrackers ready to explode. The minutes after the meeting ended stretched out into something almost inhuman, a silence so loud it pressed against my eardrums. I sat perfectly still in my chair, staring blankly at my darkened laptop screen, the reflection of my own pale, expressionless face staring back. I should have cried, screamed, thrown something maybe, but there was only numbness. A cold, clinical detachment had wrapped itself around my heart like a tourniquet, cutting off any emotional bleeding before it could start. In the sterile stillness of my Manhattan apartment, the world outside carried on obliviously. Taxis honked, sirens wailed in the distance, life unfolded in its relentless, indifferent rhythm. But inside me, everything was different now. Everything was severed. For the first time in my life, I realized just how terrifyingly alone I was. Still, there was work to be done. I opened my laptop again and typed a message into the company's internal Slack channel, addressed only to the senior management team, carefully excluding Sophie Lane. My fingers moved with mechanical precision. Regarding today's meeting, I appreciate everyone maintaining professionalism under unexpected circumstances. Personal matters will not impact project timelines or deliverables. Thank you for your discretion and support. It was brief, authoritative, impersonal, just enough to stake my claim over the situation before any gossip could metastasize beyond control. I didn't give them permission to pity me. I gave them orders. Once the message was sent, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The first battle was over. I had survived it. But survival was not enough. Survival was only the beginning. My mind moved methodically through the next steps, each thought as sharp as broken glass. Daniel had lied to me about the business trip, about his fidelity, about everything. If he could betray me once, he could have betrayed me 100 times without me ever noticing. I needed proof. I needed power. I started with our shared bank accounts. In less than 10 minutes, I found several transactions that didn't make sense. Large cash withdrawals made during supposed business trips, unfamiliar hotel charges, expensive gifts purchased from luxury stores I had never set foot in. Next, I checked our home security system, something Daniel had likely forgotten about. Every movement in and out of our apartment was logged and time-stamped. And there it was. Multiple entries while I was traveling for work, often late at night or early in the morning. A pattern, a routine, a history of betrayal written in digital ink. The realization was a second, quieter kind of heartbreak. Not the I-9. Sharp explosion of the initial discovery, but a slow, suffocating ache, like drowning while fully awake. But I welcomed it. Pain sharpened my focus. By midnight, I had compiled a damning dossier, screenshots, transaction records, security, logs, even snippets of suspicious emails I'd previously brushed off as harmless. My corporate training served me well. Documentation was second nature. I created 3 separate encrypted folders and backed them up in multiple places. My personal cloud storage, a USB drive hidden behind a loose brick in the bedroom closet, and a hard drive stashed in my office downtown. Daniel wouldn't even know the war had started until it was too late. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Patricia Monroe, a formidable divorce attorney based in Boston. Patricia specialized in high-net-worth, high-conflict cases. She had a reputation for being ruthlessly effective, exactly the kind of ally I needed. The second was to a private investigator, someone I trusted from years of professional networking. I gave him Daniel's travel itineraries, banking details, and a brief but potent summary of the situation. By the time the sun rose over the east river, the machinery of my counterattack was already in motion. I dressed carefully that day. A tailored navy suit, a crisp white blouse, heels that clicked decisively against the marble floors of our corporate headquarters. Not for Daniel. Not for Sophie. For myself. Control is not given. It is taken, and I would take everything back. At the office, whispers followed me like a phantom, but no one dared say anything outright. Eyes flickered away when I walked past. Sympathetic smiles were swallowed before they could form. Good. Pity was a poison I would not drink. I focused on my work with laser precision. Every client call, every team meeting, every project deadline, I met them all with unwavering discipline. Because no matter what Daniel had destroyed, he hadn't destroyed me. My career was mine. My name was mine. Daniel had underestimated me. Sophie had underestimated me. Everyone had, and soon they would regret it. Late that afternoon, while the city buzzed with the usual Friday energy, Patricia called me back. "We'll need to act swiftly," she said, her voice crisp and efficient. "New York is an equitable distribution state. Without evidence, he could claim half of everything. With what you have, we can make sure he walks away with nothing. Or, better yet, owing you damages." "I want it done quietly," I told her. "No drama, no public spectacle. Just clean, total destruction." Patricia laughed softly. "I like you already." That night, I slept for the first time since the betrayal. Not well, not peacefully, but with a sense of purpose humming beneath my skin. Purpose steadied my hands, slowed my heart, cleared the fog from my brain. Purpose would carry me through. Over the next week, Daniel remained blissfully unaware. He texted me sporadically. Excuses about poor signal in Chicago. Apologies for missed calls. Empty promises to make it up to me when he returned. I played along. I sent back smiling emojis, loving words, the image of a wife none the wiser. I needed him to believe everything was normal. I needed him relaxed, sloppy. Meanwhile, the private investigator delivered daily updates. Daniel and Sophie were not just sleeping together. They were planning a future. Covert meetings, hotel reservations, whispered conversations about moving in together once everything was handled. It was almost laughable, how little respect he had for me. Almost. The irony was rich. Daniel and Sophie had underestimated the very woman they had tried to destroy. They thought I would collapse. They thought they could take what I had built, my marriage, my career, my life, and twist it into something unrecognizable. But they forgot one crucial detail. I didn't climb my way to the top of one of the most competitive industries in America by being soft. I didn't survive cutthroat boardrooms, ruthless competitors, and backroom deals by being naive. I was a fighter, and I fought to win. The end would not be a public meltdown. There would be no screaming matches, no social media exposés, no messy confrontations. The end would be a surgical strike. Precise, devastating, final. Daniel Carter had made a fatal mistake when he betrayed me. He thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I had already flipped the board. There was a moment, sometime after I finished cataloging the evidence, after Patricia Monroe laid out the skeleton of our legal plan, after the first numb shock had worn off, when something inside me shifted. It wasn't healing. It wasn't forgiveness. It was clarity. A bone-deep understanding that the life I had believed in, the marriage, the partnership, the future I had invested everything into, was already dead. And if it was dead, then sentimentality had no place. Here. Only strategy remained. Only calculation. For the first time in years, I saw the world not as a wife, not as a woman betrayed, but as the strategist I had once been at the beginning of my career. The version of Emma Carter who knew how to plan 10 moves ahead, how to predict not just the next decision, but the next 5, the next 10. Daniel Carter had made the fatal mistake of assuming he was the player, and I was the board. He was wrong. I was the player. I had always been. It was time to remind him, and everyone else, exactly who I was. I began quietly. First, I scheduled a series of meetings with my financial advisor under the guise of retirement planning. Using completely legal methods, I began to reallocate portions of my accessible assets into protected accounts that would not be considered marital property. I leaned into investment vehicles that allowed me to designate separate ownership, backed by pre-existing premarital funds. Daniel would find that the financial empire he thought he could raid was slipping through his fingers $1 at a time. Next, I contacted human resources at my company. I presented the evidence of Sophie Lane's inappropriate conduct, the breach of professional ethics, the conflict of interest, the damage to internal team dynamics. I requested a formal investigation, insisting that no action be taken against her until due process had been followed. I wasn't out for petty revenge. I wanted it official. I wanted it documented. I wanted it irreversible. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to Daniel's budding side ventures. Small, private consulting gigs he had been bragging about for months. What he didn't realize was that many of these contracts had originated from my network, from relationships I had nurtured long before he ever became part of the picture. A few well-placed conversations, subtle reminders of his current instability, his poor judgment, his personal distractions. And the offers began to dry up. Potential clients grew cold. Meetings were rescheduled indefinitely. Daniel wouldn't see the hand that pulled the strings. He would simply feel the floor shifting under his feet. In parallel, I initiated a detailed audit of our shared business, investments. There were irregularities, small but enough. Funds that Daniel had redirected into personal projects without my knowledge or consent. Patricia's team built the case meticulously, thread by thread, weaving it into a net he wouldn't escape. I wasn't just playing defense anymore, I was hunting. Every action I took was deliberate, measured, patient. There were days when I felt the old anger surge inside me, hot, wild, demanding to be unleashed. Days when I wanted to storm into his temporary office space and expose him, scream at him, make him feel a fraction of the humiliation he had dumped on me. But I resisted, because this wasn't about emotion. This was about annihilation. About making sure that when Daniel finally realized he had lost everything, he would have no one to blame but himself. The private investigator sent me daily updates. Sophie and Daniel continued their clandestine meetings, oblivious to the walls closing in around them. I watched the photos, the videos, the transcriptions of whispered conversations, and felt nothing. They were insects, buzzing against the glass. They didn't even realize they were already trapped. In one particularly telling recording, Sophie asked Daniel when he would finally leave me. Soon, he promised. Emma's so focused on her career, she won't even notice. She never sees what's right in front of her. I smiled when I heard that. Oh, Daniel, you have no idea how closely I'm watching. As weeks passed, the first cracks began to show. Daniel called me more often, his voice tight, his words laced with an edge of desperation. Deals were falling through. Clients were ghosting him. Opportunities he thought were certain slipped away without warning. And always, I played the role of the loving, clueless wife. Maybe you're just stressed, I suggested sweetly. Maybe you need a break. I don't understand, he muttered once. Everything was fine. Everything was working. Maybe, I said, the picture of concern. It's time to rethink your strategy. He agreed, not realizing the irony. Inside, I was ice. There were no second chances here, no forgiveness, only the inexorable, inevitable consequences of his own arrogance. Behind the scenes, Patricia was finalizing the divorce paperwork. The evidence package we had assembled was damning enough that Daniel would have no choice but to settle quickly or face public exposure. But I didn't want quick. I wanted thorough. I wanted him to feel every loss, every failure, every ounce of humiliation that he had thoughtlessly inflicted on me. And so, I waited. I waited as HR conducted its investigation into Sophie Lane, uncovering not just her affair with Daniel, but multiple other inappropriate interactions she had tried to leverage for professional gain. I waited as Daniel's consulting side projects collapsed one by one, leaving him financially strangled and reputationally tarnished. I waited as whispers spread through the industry, not from me, never from me, but from the ripple effects of Daniel's own reckless behavior. I didn't have to raise my voice. The truth was loud enough. In the quiet moments, alone in my apartment, I sometimes wondered if revenge would truly satisfy me. If dismantling Daniel's life would fill the cavern he had left inside me. But then I remembered. This wasn't about satisfaction. It was about justice. It was about restoration. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself he had tried to steal. The pride, the dignity, the power. By the time Daniel finally realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop it. The queen doesn't warn the pawns when she moves across the board. She simply takes them. And I had only just begun. The hardest battles are the ones fought in silence. By the time Daniel realized the ground beneath him was crumbling, the damage was already too deep, the rot too widespread. Like a house built on a foundation of lies, his carefully constructed life began to collapse under its own weight, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I had no sympathy left for him. The divorce papers landed on his desk on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a professional process server right to his co-working space in Midtown. I had chosen the timing carefully, ensuring it coincided with a major client meeting he had spent months preparing for. Patricia's letterhead was crisp, official, and unyielding, outlining exactly what we demanded. Full ownership of all joint assets, financial restitution for misappropriated funds, and a confidentiality agreement to ensure he could never publicly weaponize the story against me. There was no negotiation, no plea for understanding, no second chances. Daniel called me 7 times that day. I didn't answer once. Let him feel what it was like to be ignored, to be dismissed, to be rendered invisible. I spent the day in back-to-back meetings at my office, a fortress of glass and steel towering over the chaos below. Every polished surface, every sharp angle reflected a version of me I hadn't seen in a long time, the woman who had built her life with ruthless efficiency, who had carved out a seat at the table with blood, sweat, and sacrifice. This was who I was before Daniel. This was who I had always been. That evening, I received the first status report from Human Resources. Their investigation into Sophie Lane had concluded. Multiple breaches of company policy, abuse of position, unprofessional conduct, leading to a hostile work environment. Sophie was officially terminated, effective immediately. There was no press release, no dramatic scene, just a quiet email, a lockout of her company accounts, and the end of her short, disastrous career. I didn't need to see her walk out of the building with a cardboard box to know she was finished. I could imagine it clearly enough. The stunned humiliation, the whispered gossip, the empty future stretching out before her. Actions had consequences, and Sophie Lane had finally run out of people to hide behind. Daniel's collapse came next. Clients pulled out of contracts. His reputation, once built on the foundation of my connections and credibility, disintegrated almost overnight. Friends who had once toasted him at rooftop bars and country clubs grew cold, distancing themselves from the scandal like rats fleeing a sinking ship. He tried to salvage what he could. He sent apology emails to former clients, desperate attempts to reschedule canceled meetings, pathetic overtures to mend bridges that were already burnt to ash. But it was useless. The damage wasn't just professional, it was existential. Daniel. Carter was no longer the rising star, the polished executive husband of Emma Carter. He was a cautionary tale, a whisper behind closed doors, a case study in arrogance and self-destruction. And I had orchestrated every step. There were moments, fleeting ones, when I felt the old guilt stir in my chest, moments when I remembered the man I had once loved, the man who had held my hand through sleepless nights building my career, who had celebrated every promotion, every small victory, every milestone. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the way he had so easily discarded me for a younger, more malleable version, thinking he could replace not just my body, but my entire existence. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had betrayed my trust, my loyalty, my belief in us. And for that, there could be no forgiveness, only consequences. Patricia moved swiftly through the legal system, outmaneuvering Daniel's pitifully underqualified attorney at every turn. The evidence we had was overwhelming: infidelity, financial misconduct, ethical breaches that would turn any judge's stomach. In the end, Daniel didn't fight. He couldn't. The settlement was brutal, exactly as I intended. I retained full control over all real estate holdings, liquid assets, and business shares. He was left with a fraction of what he had once imagined he would steal from me. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the message. You do not betray Emma Carter and walk away unscathed. The final court hearing was anticlimactic, just a few signatures on a stack of papers, a few clipped words from the judge, a few tight nods between attorneys. Daniel didn't even look at me as he left the courtroom, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn and colorless. I didn't look at him either. I had already moved beyond him, beyond this entire chapter of my life. Revenge wasn't a moment. It wasn't a single act of retribution. It was a process, a transformation, and I was still transforming. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my focus to rebuilding, not just my finances or my career, but my legacy. I began laying the groundwork for a new company, a boutique consulting firm dedicated to mentoring women executives, helping them navigate the brutal realities of corporate life with power, precision, and grace. I named it Phoenix Strategies because I knew what it meant to burn, and I knew what it meant to rise. The irony was almost poetic. Daniel and Sophie had tried to steal my life, my future, my power, and in doing so, they had reignited a fire in me that even I had forgotten existed. I wasn't just surviving, I was ascending. Late one night, as I reviewed business plans and scouted office spaces in San Francisco, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was Daniel. "Emma, please, can we talk? I made a mistake. I miss you." I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. He wasn't reaching out because he loved me. He was reaching out because he had nothing left. Because the bright, shiny world he had traded me for had turned out to be an illusion, a cheap imitation of the real thing. Because when the dust settled, when the lies crumbled, when the masks fell away, he realized what he had lost. Me, and he would never get me back. I deleted the message without replying. Some wars are won not by fighting, but by refusing to even engage. I had already won. The real victory wasn't in watching Daniel fall. It was in standing tall while he disappeared behind me, a footnote in a story that no longer needed his name, and I was just getting started. The thing about endings is that they are never quite as final as we imagine. When one chapter closes, it doesn't seal itself away in the past. It echoes forward, reshaping everything that follows. My marriage had ended. My so-called perfect life had shattered. But in the ruins, something new had taken root. Something fierce. Something unstoppable. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in the shadow of anyone else's ambition, anyone else's dreams. I wasn't bending or compromising or shrinking myself to fit into the narrow spaces someone else had made for me. I was free. Phoenix Strategies launched quietly but purposefully. No splashy announcements, no grand opening parties. Just a small sunlit office on the 30th floor of a glass tower in downtown San Francisco, overlooking the restless sweep of the bay. I chose San Francisco because it was a city built on reinvention, a place where people came to start over, to chase wild dreams, to build futures out of sheer force of will. It was, in many ways, a mirror of the life I was creating for myself. The company's mission was simple: to mentor, coach, and empower women navigating the brutal, beautiful world of business. Not with soft platitudes or empty slogans, but with real strategies, real tools, real power. The first few months were harder than I expected. Starting from scratch required humility, patience, and a relentless kind of hope. But there was also a thrill in it. The same electric surge I had felt in the early days of my career, when everything was still raw and possible. Word spread quickly. Women from all industries, tech, finance, marketing, law, began to find their way to Phoenix. They came bearing scars, battle wounds from careers spent climbing impossible ladders in impossible systems. I recognized myself in each of them. The woman passed over for promotion because she was too assertive. The woman asked to train the man who would eventually be promoted above her. The woman who had been told to smile more, to speak less, to be grateful for scraps. At Phoenix, they weren't just heard. They were armed. I poured everything I had learned, every battle, every betrayal, every hard-earned victory, into the curriculum: negotiation tactics, crisis management, executive presence, financial literacy, legal protection strategies. No, more victims. Only survivors. Only leaders. As Phoenix grew, I built a team of women like me. Women who had been underestimated, overlooked, and had risen anyway. Together, we created a network, a sisterhood, a fortress. Every new success was a reclamation. Every client who walked into our office and left standing taller was a battle won. Every deal closed. Every promotion secured, every startup funded, was another brick laid in the empire I was building. An empire built not on deceit or betrayal, but on resilience and brilliance. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter faded into obscurity. I heard through the grapevine that he had tried to launch a consultancy of his own, a desperate attempt to claw back relevance. But without my network, my reputation, my credibility, He was just another ex-executive with a tarnished name and a resume full of gaps. Sophie Lane, from what little information filtered back to me, had left New York entirely. Some whispered she had moved back in with her parents. Others said she was waiting tables in a small town somewhere along the East Coast. I didn't waste energy verifying the details. Their downfall wasn't my story anymore. My story was this. The early morning spent watching the sun rise over the bay as I drafted proposals and strategic plans. The late nights spent mentoring a young woman, preparing to pitch her startup to a room full of skeptical investors. The quiet victories, an email from a former client who had negotiated a 30% raise. After years of being underpaid, a thank you card from a woman who had finally been named CEO. Each success stitched new seams into the fabric of my life, stronger and more resilient than anything I had known before. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the anger faded. It didn't vanish completely. Scars don't disappear. They become part of you, reminders of the fires you survived. But the rage that had once fueled me cooled into something sharper, something cleaner. Clarity, wisdom, strength. One evening, a little over a year after the divorce was finalized, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, a glass of wine in hand, watching the city glitter and pulse below. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the war I had waged in silence. And I realized something extraordinary. If Daniel hadn't betrayed me, I might still be living that life. Small, safe, slowly suffocating beneath the weight of someone else's dreams. I might never have remembered who I truly was. His betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had set me free. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the strength I had rediscovered. Gratitude for the empire I had built with my own hands. Gratitude for the life I had reclaimed. The future stretched out before me. Vast, unknown, filled with possibilities. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The story of Emma Carter wasn't a tragedy. It was a revolution, and it was just getting started. Emma Carter's story is a testament to the resilience that lies dormant within us, waiting for the right, or perhaps the wrong, moment to awaken it. From the very first shocking betrayal during an ordinary company Zoom meeting, to the slow, surgical unraveling of her marriage, her life was set ablaze. But instead of letting the fire consume her, Emma chose to rise from the ashes. She didn't allow herself to become a passive victim of circumstance. When the world she had so carefully built crumbled at her feet, she didn't fall apart. She recalibrated. She harnessed the hurt, the betrayal, and the rage, not to destroy herself, but to build something greater. She became her own salvation. Emma meticulously planned her steps, fought back without screaming or spectacle, and reclaimed not just her dignity, but her destiny. She protected her assets, exposed the deceit that had poisoned her life, and emerged stronger than ever. Yet perhaps the most striking part of Emma's journey is what she did after her victory over Daniel and Sophie. Instead of staying trapped in the cycle of anger, instead of allowing her triumph to become her only story, she chose growth. She chose creation. She built Phoenix Strategies, a company designed not just to elevate herself, but to uplift countless other women who had faced their own battles in silence. Emma's story reminds us that revenge is not always about destruction. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is resurrection. Sometimes, the best way to destroy someone who tried to break you is to build something they could never touch. Your own success, your own freedom, your own joy. And in doing so, you don't just beat them. You transcend them. The deeper lesson here is universal. We cannot always prevent betrayal. We cannot always control when life blindsides us, when trust is shattered, or when the people we loved most reveal themselves as strangers. But what we can control, what we must fiercely protect, is how we respond. Emma teaches us that in the aftermath of betrayal, we have two choices. We can let the hurt define us, or we can let it refine us. By choosing to refine herself, Emma turned her greatest personal devastation into her greatest professional triumph. She built an empire, not despite her heartbreak, but because of it. She channeled every ounce of pain into fuel for her future, refusing to let anyone else write the final chapter of her story. So how can we apply Emma's lesson in our own lives? First, we must remember that pain, while inevitable, is also informative. Betrayal shows us where our boundaries were too soft, where our trust was misplaced, where we forgot our own value. It hurts because it teaches. Second, we must move strategically, not reactively. Emma didn't lash out impulsively. She gathered her strength, gathered her evidence, and moved with precision. In moments of heartbreak, it's tempting to seek instant gratification through confrontation or rage. But true power lies in patience and planning. Finally, we must aim higher than revenge. The best form of getting even isn't making someone else miserable. It's making yourself unstoppable. When you rise after being broken, when you build after being betrayed, when you thrive after being abandoned, you win a victory no one can ever take from you. Emma Carter didn't just rebuild her life. She redefined it. And in doing so, she showed all of us what it truly means to rise. Now, as you reflect on her journey, here's a small question for you to think about. If you were betrayed deeply, what would your first reaction be? A. Strike back immediately and confront the person face to face. B. Step back, strategize, and plan a calculated response. Comment your answer below. A or B? I'm genuinely curious to see which path you would take. Also, I would love to hear your personal opinion. What lesson from Emma's story resonated with you the most? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could inspire someone else who needs to hear it. And finally, if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful, emotional, and deeply real journeys like Emma's, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep creating inspiring content that touches hearts and sparks real conversations. Thank you for being here. And remember, your greatest rise often comes after your deepest fall.